actually get people comment and like, oh, no way you're Muslim. I used to, watch your content. So it's always nice to see. To my peers at the time, it was like I was living the dream. I kind of dropped out of college, to do YouTube. I shifted into the music industry when the channel started doing quite bad. The income wasn't coming in. For 4 years, I worked with the biggest names in the world, like major record labels, the biggest music festival at the time, or I think still today, they're the biggest music festival. I was a community manager, so I'd like scale fan communities, work with A-list celebrities, some of the biggest artists even today. And I did it through a platform called Discord. Funny enough, I was like a Discord expert almost. Out from the outside, I'd say it looked probably incredible. I was like the youngest in this very gate-kept industry, which is the music industry. I'd without glazing myself, I'd kind of trailblazed in this kind of role I was in. I'd traveled to different countries because of the job. The director of this label wanted to employ me, give me equity in his company. It was like life, had finally looked up for me. I went, 18 years before this, and things weren't going too well. Maybe the YouTube stuff was, pretty good, but then that all crashed down, and then I got the music stuff, and it seemed amazing, right? But the truth was, under everything, it was very, very hollow. The music industry, that kind of entertainment world, like Hollywood in general, is very, very hollow. It's hyper individualism, performance. Everything is just an act. It's very consumerist, exploitative. The whole thing is just kind of deception. And we're seeing it more kind of unfold today, or like the veil's kind of dropping for a lot of people. So, that glamorous facade of it's empty. I met some famous people that I'd maybe idolized at one point in my life, subhanAllah. And, you realize, and this is important, that everyone who has anyone they look up to, be it, a celebrity, if it's a Muslim scholar or something, alhamdulillah, I'm sure this is a fine, but you don't idolize them. And if maybe someone listening to this listens to music, or maybe they watch a YouTuber, whoever it be, when you meet them, people say don't meet your idols. Some of them are great. A lot of them aren't. And that's, just the stark reality of it. These things actually help me begin to question everything. I went, for that kind of, I don't know, that mental, it was a mess, like a whole mess up in my brain, I went through like the question of, what am I doing this for? What's the point of it? I'd begin to succeed in every worldly measure, the average worldly measure, but I didn't feel anything, I think from this, that's when I went to explore everything else, left-wing politics. I became quite politically aware. I went down a like far leftist path, new age spirituality, astrology, communism, Marxism, socialism. I read a lot of history. Every step would give me something more to think about intellectually, but it never answered the main question of, what is my purpose? Why am I here? What is morality? And what is the self? Who am I really? I didn't know at the time, but I was unknowingly searching for God or Allah. And Islam was essentially right under my nose. I think the catalyst to my journey was, subhanAllah, I met someone around the time. They knew a lot about all these isms. And it was, one day after work, movie-like kind of romance story in itself, but we're not going to go into it. Don't worry, it is wholesome. But yeah, we weren't in the right place. And though she was the most like meaningful, real connection I'd ever had, I was very sheltered in this creative world. We were both searching and broken in our own ways. She was an Arab, actually a Muslim, funny enough, who had grown distant from her faith because of a difficult home life. She was exposed to things that were maybe more cultural than Islamic, so the lines had been blurred, and this is quite a problem in the faith. Not that it should deter anyone, because you have the Quran and the Sunnah, and I'll get more into that as well. But I insisted her to kind of leave what I thought was a dangerous environment, and naturally our bond grew closer. We touched on topics about purpose, like we knew each other for 2 years. We spoke about what life meant, and through her, as her family were practicing, Islam began to creep in. you know. And in retrospect, I seen her, you know, reconnecting with something that I had no concept of at the time. There was this turning point when I was with her where, you know, everything just clicked. It was like, you know, Islam is the truth. It's not that simple. I think my real introduction to Muslims was through humanitarian aid work for Palestine, which we both collaborated on. You know, this put me in contact with more Muslims, like people that were actually living the faith. So, you know, despite the occupiers' intent to demonize Islam, it actually opened me up to brotherhood. And I know there's a lot of other people that had the same experience. You know, I saw the justice, the clarity, and it was actually the first time I ever felt that sense of community through Islam. And the second was actually after accepting the faith during Ramadan. I'm going to sidestep here a bit, but yeah, I was in predominantly a Pakistani masjid for Ramadan during the last 10 days. I was there for something called itikaf, where you like sleep in the masjid. You kind of just disconnect from everything. And the hospitality was, you know, mashallah, it was incredible. Like, I've never really connected or spoke to many Pakistani brothers before. I know Canyon, I think you also had a similar story, or you know, you're very fond of the Pakistanis as well. But yeah, great people. I think, you know, I was the only white and Revert Muslim there. Maybe, I think maybe like 30, 40 of us were sleeping in the masjid during these last 10 days of Ramadan. And yeah, I don't know. They were very loving. And this is like the second time it really was like clicked for me. And it was only a few months after accepting Islam. I was like, yeah, you know, if the truth is already clear, but this is like, you know, subhanallah. The me before Islam, I label myself agnostic.